welcome aboard for our last one of the series. We're going to kind of evaluate all this after we're done to see how we can improve on attendance and advertising, things like that next time. But also from your input, content area, things like that. We'll talk about how we can improve. We'll wait for the rabbi to get back, but I think where we left off was you asking about heaven. Remember?
Yes.
And so we'll wait for the rabbi to come back and we'll talk about that. Anyway, any suggestions from y'all as far as getting a bigger crowd?
I think it's word of mouth. We talk about it to our friends and
Time of
family.
year, time of day, day of the week. What do you think?
It's a hard one.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a
Well,
good time
if
right
people
now.
are in church in the morning, do they
Right.
feel like coming at 1
You know,
o'clock?
most churches are 10 o'clock and are through by 11:30. So I don't know, maybe an hour later might help a little bit in that regard. Another day of the week.
Did we advertise or try to market on social media? We did.
Not really, to be
Well, we
honest.
didn't do an ad. We put it on our page.
Okay.
But it was not done.
We were kind of last minute.
Yeah, and this week we had an email sent out with the subject line as third session of
Yeah. and it was
Taste of
done.
Judaism. Yeah. So
Well, you know, there was a flyer that went in, Alex got to change it.
That's what I was just
Yeah,
saying.
and she, that was supposed to be for that interfaith thing.
well, she was also supposed to be sent.
Yeah, and I
that too.
thought, and I was looking for the
Yeah.
Taste of Judaism.
That's right.
So
So
we
we got,
we could get more organized and have it scheduled a little bit better. We just need to plan, I guess we need to have a marketing meeting about the class and lay out our timeline and,
yeah.
because you can schedule it on Facebook where it would go every day.
Sure,
so
yeah,
you
yeah,
remind
yeah.
people.
So yeah, definitely,
So I think we just
those
need to-
things need to be thought about, and that's true.
I didn't know whether, you just wanted, the congregation. So I didn't really mention it to my friends, but I think that I have a lot of friends, Christian friends that would be interested.
Yeah.
But I didn't know whether you wanted it for,
Right, sure.
Jewish.
Yeah, there was a big crowd, we have a nice sized crowd that interfaith thing. We went to it, y'all did too, on with the
Thursday night,
Thursday,
yeah. I
You
heard.
were fabulous. I mean, you really, really were, and everybody was impressed with you.
Thank you.
So,
I wonder if you could do it more like I'm just gonna put it in quotes, like a lunch and learn, because if you're going after the demographic that might not be working every day, which my demographic is working every day, so the weekends are our only free
Sure.
time. I don't know how you're gonna get that
Sure.
group interested in something like this. You could do it during Sunday school for the parents that might be interested in the temple, or parents that drop their kids
Right.
at religious school somewhere.
Right.
But maybe do it as
Hey,
a
baby.
lunch and learn and
Yeah, that's true.
and
Hello.
make it more of a
Sure.
reason to stop. Just throwing it out. That's not gonna help you much because you're teaching every day.
Right, but we can talk about how that could be done. Sure, we could figure something out. So we left off last time, I think, with your question about heaven, Judaism and heaven. You want to hit that first, or you can?
It's not like I have any definitive answer. I'd like to, particularly you asked such a wonderful question about God. And it's such a kind of personal, question at one level. Wondered if people would like to just talk in general about why heaven may be an important topic, whether one believes in it or whether one doesn't. It certainly comes up in in funeral preparations. It certainly comes up during the time of loss and grieving, intense grieving where we lose a loved one. What are some of your thoughts about heaven and especially in the context, I would imagine all of us here have lost loved ones, people that we love dearly, and probably during those times we reflect on, is there an afterlife, or think about the world to come, for these, for their souls and so forth. I'd like to just open it up first before, I start chiming in. I'd like to hear, because there's not one right answer from a Jewish perspective.
Is there much Jewish commentary on heaven? I mean, I can't remember ever in Sunday school
You're
ever
right.
talking about it.
When you study the stories in the Bible, there is not a reference to heaven. All we're told is that when someone died, for the most part, they're gathered unto their people. Vayikva, they breathed their last breath, and they were gathered unto their people. The only time where there seems to be an allusion, I'm talking about the Torah now, the book of prophets and book of writings is a little bit different, but not much. There is Jacob, when he says to the brothers, when he's being shown the coat that's torn, he says, I will go down to Sheol, continuing to mourn. And we don't know what Sheol is. I interpret it idiomatically, and Glenn, maybe you, again, this is wide open interpretation. I will go to my grave mourning. That's how, from an idiomatic or just a common language, Sheol to me is understood. I will go down to my grave mourning the loss of my son. I will never recover from this.
Well, and the way I was taught is that there's kind of a reason why it's not mentioned much. That the only mention that it is in, from what I've read, is that there is a world to come, and but we're not told any more detail or much more detail as far as this world to come. That it's a better world. It's a better place. And the reason is because Judaism emphasizes the here and now, that God will take care of us. But right now we shouldn't be doing good or not doing good, or doing mitzvot or not mitzvot, because we'll be rewarded or punished. And in Christianity, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's a religion of belief, and heaven and hell is an important part of being rewarded or not. And in Judaism, it's not supposed to be set up to be a reward. That you do mitzvot because it's the right thing to do. We're supposed to do them, and we're not going to be rewarded at the end. That we're not doing it for that reason. And once we die, God will take care of us. And that we live today for now, and we're not gonna pre-plan for what happens after we're gone. And like a lot of religions, suicide is forbidden in Jewish law. And one reason that I've read is that the answer could be, oh well, if it's such a great world to come, I want to go there now. So we're not supposed to tackle it that way.
And I've always thought that, as far as, when someone dies, that eternity is living on in the
Right.
memory of your loved one.
That's a big Jewish tradition. That's a big interpretation.
No more than I thought I did.
Absolutely, you always do.
Maybe I should sort of respond to
Okay.
your comment about
Okay.
Christianity. And of course, there's no question but that the Christians believe in heaven. However, I don't think most of them believe it's a reward. It's a matter of grace.
Matter of
Grace.
grace.
In other words, you don't earn your way into heaven. You get to heaven by belief.
Right.
And so it's not so much a reward, although the Christians do believe that our actions here on earth will have to be accounted for in heaven.
Yes.
Now, from my perspective, I think one of the things that means so much to me in my belief of heaven is being reunited with loved ones. There's no question about that. And in our conversations, Norma will say, I hope you're right.
That's what I tell
And
Sherry.
my response really is, I hope I'm right too, but I believe I am. And so I don't think, I don't know exactly, but, you know, I would hope that Norma would believe that she is going to be reunited with David, just as I'm going to be reunited with Betty. So anyway, from a Christian perspective, that's the way I see it.
And Sherry and I have the same conversations, because I'm like you
But
about
I'm
that.
right.
I'm like you
You're right.
about that, hoping she's right, but it's very hard for me to believe that.
Yeah.
It really is, but.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, it's, I don't know for sure what heaven is.
Right.
I don't think anybody
No, that's
does. And I think also there's a reason for that. And you put your finger on it. If we really knew what heaven was like, we would probably want to go there now.
Right.
So without knowing, I think
That's,
we're not tempted to
that's a good
think
point.
that. So anyway.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a footnote to what Glenn was saying. You know, again, looking at the Torah and the Bible as sort of like the Constitution, the interest in the afterlife, we don't see that until we get to the rabbinic literature. That's where it's lots of speculation. I mean, and some of it is quite humorous for some, again, going back to the Talmud that we took a look at, there's some writings that say that for the rabbis, the olam, it's called the olam haba, the world to come, i.e. heaven, they're going to get to study Torah with God. That, you know, that's just, but I think it's meant for that kind of reaction. It's kind of like, you know, have a fantasy
A commercial.
of what is the most meaningful, most wonderful thing in your life. I mean, I don't think it's taken seriously. I don't think it's taken, oh, that must be what it's like. And there's all kinds of speculative statements like that, and you see. You don't see that until the written literature, when you're talking in terms of 200 CE, 300 CE. Now, it may have been a tradition before, very possible. But the Torah that we have today is done by about 525 BC. This is a scholarly dating of the Bible. The first 5 books, at least, 525 BCE. And then by 250 BCE, we have the entire Bible that we have today. So you're looking at another 400 or 500 years, at least, before we have a writing that indicates this concern or this reflection about the world to come. So I think there's some evolution to that. It may have been influenced by early Christianity, or early Christianity may have been influenced by some of these writings. Hard to know. So I just wanted to put some historical context to it.
What's interesting to me, because I think in Judaism, I'm always somewhat wishy-washy about what I think is right or wrong. And when you hear someone, you grew up Christian, so you're very strong in you're strong, you believe there's a heaven. I think in Judaism, somewhat, we're taught to question.
Right.
So I question myself as much as I question everything else, and everything I do in life, I question.
And that's part of
everything.
Judaism. That's a big part of Judaism.
Yeah.
You hit it right there.
Yeah, And there are times though that I'm envious when people know exactly what they believe, and I would love to.
Yeah,
I mean, it would be so easy for somebody to
nice.
stand up there and tell me this is what is gonna happen. But we were always taught, no, you just have to keep questioning.
I will say, my takeaway from the Thursday session, the thing that really opened my eyes was that the Christians who were there really had a strong sense, and I say this with utmost respect. 'Cause they're modern, just like we are. I mean, they're not dogmatic. It wasn't, but I just had this sense that they really believe, almost without a doubt, and correct me if I'm wrong, the people who were there, that they really believed that this was the word of God. That when they read the script, when they read the scripture, well, yeah, I'm not sure that they would read the Bible in a literal way. I don't mean that, but the sense I had was that there was no doubt in their mind that what they were reading, what they were studying was the word of God. Whereas, like Carol says, we as a movement fudge on that question or have doubts about that question because we've incorporated into our movement the scholarly approach, which suggests that this Bible that we have was written over a long period of time, divinely inspired, written for lots of different reasons, and therefore it may not have that same level of this is the word of God. I'd like the people who were there, what was your sense of that?
Gil?
Well, I think what I would think about what Carol was saying, and I also think about where we live.
Yeah.
I think about the society around us because
Yeah.
the Jewish community is very, very small. So our exposure to other Jews and having this constantly reinforced in everything we do is different because we're around people that are not Jewish. I mean, you can't but help be influenced by the rest of your community and the society you live in. And I think about early on when I was childhood, and I think about some of the books I have, my early books, I still have a little book my mother gave me when I was in the second grade on the Ten Commandments and the illustration and, God and heaven and it's childlike. And so it's, but, we get, that gets imprinted on our brain at an early age, and the rest of society affects us. The overwhelming majority of my classmates, my friends were not Jewish. I mean, it's just by necessity. So where, so that deep down in the cortex of my brain somewhere, and then of course as we get older and we we start thinking and doubting, and we have a left and dogmatic view about things, and how all that gets mixed into this cauldron of all these other things that we've learned and been taught. And and I've gone through different stages in my life. Like Glenn, I grew up in a more traditional type of Judaism at the synagogue, and so that's part of what I've been infused with. But I don't know. Ian and I've had the same conversation that happened with we hedge. Like you said, it's right. But I think like Glenn, I mean, my whole thing is trying to live the best life I can, and I certainly have not lived up to all those ideals, but it's every day, it's a new day, and trying to live.
You've done a lot of good.
Like we can, so I don't, but it's critical to me, heaven and hell.
Right.
I mean, to me, those are just, that's all flows from good and evil, because I think the reward thing for all of us, because is still, there, still influence. But I certainly understand, I don't think, when I think about, my Christian friends, I don't think they do things, exhibit compassion, empathy, do right just because it's gonna reward them. I think they feel like we do, because it's the right thing to do.
It's to love my,
Yeah.
love your
Tell him
neighbors.
what you said if you went to heaven,
Oh,
back in the present.
Well, when
yeah.
I took over this temple presidency again,
Twice.
and going through that, and then why did I do this, and all this, and I'm thinking, when I, if there is heaven, when I get up there, they're gonna welcome Enid in right through, because she is same way a person as I know. What me, I'll get up there and they're gonna call me aside, take me in a room with a bare light bulb and say, unroll this, scroll of all my, of all my sins here. But I was temple president again.
That counts double.
Well, you are a fool.
That counts double.
No, I think he needs to go for three.
Yeah, I
Three
do.
times the charm.
I know.
I think you wanted to say.
I would like to just comment on the distinction between Christians and Jews and their belief about God and whether it can be literally. First of all, I've always felt that there is not a whole lot different between the Christian and the Jew, other than Christ, of course. Beyond that, to me, the Bible is the Word of God. And I do read it literally, but I don't read it as literal in the sense that it has to happen exactly the way the words. I read it as a message from God. Hey, God speaking to me through Scripture. And I have found throughout my life that the same verse in one of the books will speak to me different today than it did 40 years ago. And so, is that an interpretation of the words? I don't think so.
It's just maturity. That's what I think.
And so, yes, I think Christians believe the Bible is the Word of God. I have a lot of Christian friends that will question whether you read it literally or not.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of Christian friends that say you have to read it literally.
I didn't hear that those second parts in the people that came on Thursday.
Well, which
I heard the
churches?
first part.
What churches were they?
One was Baptist
Yeah.
Church, First Baptist Church.
Baptist and Presbyterian primarily.
Mhm.
Now, that's why all of my Baptist friends read it literally. You cannot interpret the word. Presbyterian friends tend to be a little bit off of that. Episcopalians, that's what I am. We're like Jewish, black and white, you gotta kind of, one of the things you said at the very outset about converting from Christianity to Judaism is that if you're not looking, or if you're looking for black or white, Judaism is not for you. And, I think that is true of Christians too. I mean, I don't think that it has to be black or white. It's how God speaks to you.
I would, from what I heard, that part I thought was very enlightening. I did not hear them in the way that they related to Scripture, the way they cited it, the way they worked with those texts, New Testament or the Jewish. I don't call it the Old Testament just because I just like that. I don't like that old, new, like the new is better, the old, I don't know. So I like to just call it the Jewish Bible. It's the same thing. I didn't hear the kind of literalism or the dogmatism. I heard a lot of sincerity, a lot of, not necessarily searching, but sensitivity about the way in which to read and understand the word. But what was interesting to me was how the belief, the firm belief that I think unites the three groups that you're talking about, is that that this was the word, that this is the word of God. I'm not sure that in Jewish circles, it's necessarily believed like that.
Well, in
Yeah,
Reform
Judaism.
Judaism, Progressive Judaism,
Right.
Orthodoxy, it is the word of
Right,
God.
that's
It's
true.
literal
That's what I
word
was-
of God.
That's right.
And that the
And
Torah was
certainly-
given written by God. So that it depends where on that spectrum you are. Patricia's been trying to say something for a long time. Go ahead, Patricia.
I have two things to say. First of all, I have talked to a lot of people who are Christian, different denominations. And they say that if you're good, and no, they say if you believe in Jesus, you will go to heaven for sure. So I question, I say, so if I'm a killer and I kill you and I die, they say, you're going to go, can I go to? She said, oh yes, if you believe in Jesus, you will go. So that just strike me. You know, I'm a bad person, but I believe in Jesus and I'm gonna go to heaven. So I don't have to worry about killing someone or not. So that really, and I have spoken a lot about it, and they keep saying that, you know, if you believe in Jesus, you go to heaven. That's the only way you can go to heaven. And the second thing is, to me, everything is temporary. We are temporary. Everything we do is temporary. It doesn't last forever. Nothing lasts forever. So this is how I see it. You know, I lost my parents and I miss them a lot, but it was time for them to go. I don't know what's going to happen on the other side. We don't know, but I don't expect anything. I expected that I did everything I could for them when they were alive. Everything. I don't believe in going to the cemetery and crying and crying. Now I'm going to cry. No, let me do what I need to do
Right.
out here, because now I feel that I did everything and I feel content with myself. Of course, I miss them, but I'm okay. I can go to sleep without any
Yeah.
guilt.
Exactly.
So to me, that's
Well said.
what it is.
That's beautifully said.
Well, I have some Christian friends that are Episcopal, and I've talked to them, and they see the Bible as metaphors.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
That's
So-
Episcopal, which is, yes.
But I don't think you feel that way, do you? It's the metaphor that you.
Not really, no. I want to just comment that I had the
Yes.
same
Mhm.
thoughts go through my mind about the Christian belief that the only way is through Christ. Because one of my best friends was David Conrad. And I had many conversations with David about heaven. And I said to him, I don't understand it, but I believe you're going to be in heaven. He had a Jewish belief. He didn't believe in Christ, but I believe he'll be in heaven. Now, you want me to explain that? No, I can't explain that.
But don't you think that's more of a progressive Christian attitude?
It may be.
I mean,
Yes.
But
there's
that's
a
just
lot
the way I
of,
feel about it.
especially in the Deep South, a way more fundamentalist Christian view that you're way more progressive in that thought, don't you think? Than a lot of Christians.
Probably so,
I mean, and
but-
I teach at a rural school where, you know, it's Jesus or nothing.
Well, it begs the
The
question,
only way.
would they even be exposed to Judaism? Would they
Right.
even come
Well,
to
I'm
something
it.
like this?
I'm it.
Yeah.
And you know, I was
Speeches.
thinking about what you said about the attitude Thursday night. The ones that would not think that way wouldn't be there.
Right.
Yeah.
Just
In
like
other
that.
words, you had a crowd who,
Yeah.
Christian,
Was
who
open.
said, I'm coming to the temple, and I'm open, and I'm willing to discuss, and I mean, that particular demographic,
It's narrow.
that is narrow. Which I don't think that speaks to the entire community, but.
No,
I
I wasn't suggesting that it was, and you're absolutely correct. I mean, there are fundamentalists in every religion,
Sure.
every faith. And especially being in the Deep South, I'm still learning about the Deep South. I've been around.
Good luck.
It's a different animal.
Yeah, it is different.
But he's bought into that.
Yes,
I
that's
know, but
good.
I'm not sure when we first interviewed you if you bought into the South being as different as it is.
That's, well, I knew it was different. but different in a way that I didn't expect difference to be. So in some ways very positive, and of course in some ways, some ways a wrestling and a struggling and all of that. My sermon maybe reflected a little bit of that on Friday night as well. That it's different. It and it's a Judaism that one has to take a step back and really respect and really honor, even when there's traditions that are kind of hard to understand. And you have to respect that essentially because this place has been here for nearly 178 years. I mean, that's a long time, and decisions have been made in context of the culture and in context of the life. And I'm reminded of a story about an Orthodox rabbi that fits kind of nicely here. So there was a great sage who was the head of Yeshiva University in New York, Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik, the scholar beyond scholar in terms of Orthodox Judaism, Talmud. I mean, he was unbelievable. I passed it, and unfortunately developed Alzheimer's and all that. Anyway, so there was some type of a kashrut or some type of a ritual question and discussion, and he says, this is the rule. The other suggestion or the other proposal was not accepted halacha, which once Joseph Soloveitchik says it, that's it. I mean, there's no debate because his learning is so great. So a rabbi goes out to Colorado, takes the first congregation Orthodox. So this is a true story. And the rabbi calls up Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik. He explains he's got this problem, and he taught us to go a more stringent way. And but it's not going to work. What do I do? I'm in a circumstance that doesn't fit. It's not going to happen. And Joseph Soloveitchik said, in this you apply the rule that I said didn't apply. And he said, but you told me otherwise. And that's a serious deal. He says, you're not in New York City now. You're in Colorado. It's different. And I think that's been a helpful framework in terms of understanding because it's different here. And I don't mean that I mean that in a good way. I don't mean that in any way other than profound, really profound respect. It's different. It's different. But the people are good-hearted, and the people are very Jewish.
Yeah, I found it.
I wouldn't be here if I didn't think that. That's more what tipped the scales for me.
That speaks to the Jews' ability to adapt to worldwide cultures without losing their Jewish identity.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, and to do it here is
That's part
that's
of
quite an accomplishment.
why we're still here.
Yeah.
Patricia, you hit.
When you were saying about it was a selected group, it reminded me, we have the Christian-Jewish dialogue for 50 years. And it's a wonderful thing, it was closed for 2 years with COVID, and I'm involved with it since I arrived. And the people that go there are people who want to know about you, you want to know about me.
Yeah.
It's like we don't want to, normally when we don't know anything about somebody, we fear them. They might be black, they might be Chinese, and the skin, and we kind of, walk on the other side. But this gives us a time to learn about each other. And literally, the people who started it, she was Catholic and he was another denomination, and then they put it together, and they did wonderful things. But today, we are the only, literally Alabama is the only state that has them, because the rest of the world, or the rest of the states, they're more university, it's professors. So they talk about this within, we are the one who are lay people. Now we talk, the rest of it
Right.
is up there.
Yeah.
Because when I have gone to lectures, I mean, they're all professors and they're all writing, but here it's just you and I.
Well, the Philbins were pioneers
Yes.
and
great.
way ahead of their time. Christians who started the Christian-Jewish dialogue became the largest and one of the oldest in the country, I believe.
It is.
And of course, no other place was like it, and it was because of them. And the fact of it being started and carried on by a Christian couple really made it more powerful. Because when we had Holocaust remembrances services, and when they sponsored all these things, the fact that it was from the non-Jewish community in tandem with the Jewish community made it a lot more powerful, that it was coming from them. No, they were very unusual, wonderful people.
Yeah, and then something became the trial. I mean,
Right,
the
with
Muslims
Muslim.
and the Christians,
Right,
and that was amazing. It kind of dissolved because.
yeah,
of
that
this.
got very interesting.
And that was really, we did at Spring Hill once a month, and we were round tables. And we would bring like Muslim, a Jewish, and talk about whatever, let's say death, or whatever. So they will give their perspective about it. And then between us, we had to have at least three.
Yeah, it got very interesting. I sat on one of those
Yeah,
panels
that was.
and at Spring Hill College, and
Spring Hill College, we
because
had it, yeah.
then we brought in the Muslim perspective, and the Middle Eastern Muslim
Different,
perspective
yes.
versus also the African American Muslim community.
Mhm.
So it got very interesting, and most of you have been to those things. Yeah.
I'll put a little plug in on November, I think it's November 8th. if I'm
Hey,
not
that's our
mistaken.
first.
Yeah, we're gonna tackle the subject of abortion in light of the most recent Supreme Court decision. So that's.
I think we're gonna be at the dinner.
Yeah, it's gonna be a
Yeah.
Jerusalem Cafe.
Is that
Okay.
Christian?
No, yeah, that's
Jewish
Christian dialogue.
So.
This is kind of the board putting it
Right, the board,
together,
yeah.
so we
I don't
can
think
take it
turn anybody-
outside.
I wouldn't turn anybody.
I would imagine, I don't know,
I'm
I'm
on
only
the
a
board. I
board
wouldn't-
member, little,
I
Yeah,
wouldn't turn
anybody.
anybody.
I would imagine that anybody can
Yeah,
go.
anybody could come. It's
I would
okay.
imagine, but,
Jam-packed.
so, but
I don't know what
it's.
will be the result of the Jewish-Christian dialogue after that meeting, but at least up to that time.
No, I think it'll be very simple. I mean, the community here is very open to that, yes,
Yeah,
yes.
Very good dialogue.
Yes.
I meant that.
And they
meeting,
have
so-
brought people to speak, wonderful, there was, Levine, she's a professor, I don't remember what, but she teaches Christianity and she's Jewish. And she actually was at the Baptist, church, and she was wonderful, I mean, everybody loved her. And all the Christian, she was unbelievable speaker.
We got a little bit far afield on the question of heaven, though. We did deal
That's
with the
okay.
question of
I think
belief.
that's great. I think that's good. Where do you want to go from here?
Could I ask
will
one
leave it-
question?
Absolutely.
My sister keeps texting me, ask them about cremation, what is the Jewish view on cremation? I said I would ask.
Well, I'll hit it from the lay perspective first, and then you can, but it was frowned upon for the most part. That, and I'm trying to find the reference. Let me see. Where it's considered a mitzvah to bury one's dead. And putting the burial of the body into the earth, ashes to ashes. And so for up until recent times, it was pretty much forbidden. But according to what my research said, that there's no really clear-cut prohibition of cremation in halachic literature. So, and more reform, especially reform congregations, are moving to where it's okay. Real, very progressive congregations are debating it not necessarily on the halachic standpoint, the Jewish law standpoint, as much as what's greener. And there's some thought that it's not so as green, and that, but there's debate over that. So it's from a different approach.
The cremation is not as.
Right.
You mean because of the
The
burning.
the burning?
the burning,
Yeah,
and the cremation, the incineration,
Yeah,
And the
there's-
stuff that doesn't burn.
right? And what goes into the atmosphere.
Right.
So that's kind of where that debate is. It's ironic because For years, now it's become very popular, especially in California, where you have a green funeral where the body is wrapped in a shroud, put in something that can decompose in the earth, and it's put into the earth. Well, does that sound familiar? I mean, that's what a Jewish funeral has always been. It's supposed to be in a plain wooden box with no ornamentation, so that it can decompose and go back to the earth. If we could get away with not having a vault, that's more Jewish to not have a vault. In Mobile, Alabama, you have to because we're below the water table. But the vaults are supposed to be able to leak in Jewish law to where it can go back to the earth. And so now progressive congregations that are saying, well, cremation's okay, are actually, there are a couple of congregations that I know of in Tennessee, where they have special segments of the congregation, sections of the cemetery for crematory remains. They built this very elaborate, very beautiful, at Congregation Micah, section of the cemetery. Others are saying they can be buried as if it was a body and put underground and marked. Helen,
Yeah.
one second. Helen was
Okay.
cremated,
Okay.
and she nobody asked any questions. I think we were between rabbis, so Silverman actually did it. And it's her crematory remains are buried in the cemetery, in the temple cemetery, as if it was a body there, with a stone, with a monument, everything. But underneath, it's in a wooden box is the crematory remains. So I think it's becoming more and more acceptable. And it's interesting that debate now, especially in Reform Judaism, is less about the halakhic nature and more about the green nature of it. So anyway, I'm sorry.
I didn't mean to interrupt. I was going to just say that at our last annual meeting,
That's right.
we, the cemetery committee put forth a policy that was adopted that sanctioned burying cremated
Right.
remains. And we did exactly, it would be treated the same as.
Yes.
You had to have a plot,
Yes.
and it's the same as you would if you would be, loved one would have been buried in a coffin, we would do it.
Right. I think that's wonderful.
Cremated remains to be put in a cemetery.
I think that was wonderful, and it was interesting that Silverman actually
I know.
did the service,
Fran Brown.
because in conservative Judaism, that's a big no.
Fran Brown was cremated.
Right. Absolutely.
Who was it?
And Arthur.
This is,
Arthur Prince, Fran Brown, and also Gene and Roland Fry donated their body to the University of South Alabama.
I wanted to ask you about that. Isn't that a bigger mitzvah?
I think
You
so.
actually give the body?
I think so. I'm considering it.
Me too.
My thought is that, it sounds kind of corny, I guess, but, I can teach even after I'm dead.
No, no,
And so why not keep on teaching? And then, of course, the bodies are cremated and presented back to the families. But Gene and Roland both did that.
Actually, my granddaughter, my middle one, is accepted to medical school here. And I'd really be
Yeah,
thinking
I'm
about it.
checking into it.
And what they will do is they will send me someplace else, because they will not want my granddaughter to see me. But it's a wonderful thing that
I
you
think
do.
so.
You just give it a,
I think so.
my
Rabbi Lee?
husband doesn't think so, but I do.
Yeah, my understanding, I can't cite chapter and verses, is that halachically, that cremation is forbidden because of the destruction of the body, that human beings, according to scripture, were made in the image and likeness of God. So therefore, when you're taking an active part to destroying the body, putting it into a furnace to be burned, that's an active form of destruction as opposed to returning the body to the earth and having the earth, as was cited earlier, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. So my understanding of the halacha is that it is certainly frowned upon, but I think it's forbidden, but I don't want to say that with absolute certainty. But it's pretty clear in the text that I've studied that anything other than the traditional Jewish burial, as when you so described it earlier, would be not in favor of the halacha, would not, would be contrary. So where does that put someone, say, like me, who attempts to some extent look at classical Judaism as a resource? I would not, as a rabbi, advise someone to do cremation. I would say what the law is. If they want to go ahead and do that, they can. That's up to them, because as a Reformed Jew, each person has to select those practices that are going to be most meaningful. That's an essential tenet, that there's a certain level, to borrow maybe a legal phrase and maybe something from medical ethics, autonomy. Autonomy is very highly valued as opposed to imposing a standard upon a community. So
And you would do the service.
So say they go ahead, so there's a principle in the Talmud that says, it goes like this, lechatchila, which means at the outset, I would not advise someone to have a cremation. B'diavad, if it's already happened and there's nothing I can do, then of course I'm going to do the fruit, and I tell people that, so yes, I will definitively preside over a ceremony where the body has been cremated, and we'll treat it the same in all other respects, and respecting the decision. That wasn't meant, but we've had some experience with cremation in not such a good way. And that also, because I think more of my own historical experience, which has been substantial in terms of Eastern Europe and that whole thing. So I'm heavily biased. I really recognize my bias. But still, there's that, the cremation of really millions. For me, it's difficult. For example, at Auschwitz, there's something called the pool of ashes, which is right next to two crematorias, crematoria 2, crematoria 3. And I think about that image, not just me, because of my background, because of my history. So I think for me, for those two reasons, just my own self, I think I just won't be. I like the notion of being buried without a vault, but the law of the state governs. I mean, it takes, you usually have to do that. But it actually accomplishes, if you do it in the Orthodox tradition, or the traditional way, it accomplishes the same ends. The body does decompose, the body does return to the earth, and so forth.
And
I
also,
don't know, I'm always worried about I hope I haven't offended anybody. I hope I haven't done anything to say the rabbi is rigid or anything like that.
and also in Orthodoxy, in Reform Judaism, we talk about a messianic era, that we hope for peace on earth, we hope for no more wars, we hope for this messianic time, not necessarily a person. In Christianity, of course, that person will be Jesus coming back. In Orthodoxy, it will be a person coming back to be the Messiah, the Mashiach. And so in Orthodoxy, they believe that the body, and when the Mashiach comes, when the Messiah comes, people will rise from the dead. And you can't rise from the dead if you've been cremated. That's why in strict Orthodoxy, no tattoos, because you're just destroying the body, as you said, or defacing the body. Now, of course, in this day and age, when I was a kid, you got a tattoo if you were in the Navy or you were drunk. Now,
Yeah.
everybody has a tattoo. I mean, my 17, 16-year-old students, probably 75% of them have tattoos. So it's a different world in that respect, and a lot of Jews have tattoos. And if you were buried, if you had a limb amputation, the limb was supposed to be saved and buried with you when you died in Orthodoxy, so that part would be there. But in Reform Judaism, we look at all that very symbolically, that we're not going to rise from the dead, but we do pray for a messianic time. So that's part of that too. But I think, and in Judaism, weighing one mitzvah versus something else, weighing the breaking a law versus performing a mitzvah, in the case of donating your body,
I don't think that's breaking it.
no, that's my point, is that by far, the donation of the body is by far a bigger mitzvah than considering the cremation as something negative. In other words, that's a result of doing that good mitzvah. So that, in my opinion.
Well, it's the hardest form of charity.
Right.
Yes.
Without reward,
Right.
with which brings us to Maimonides. I mean, the 8 levels.
Yeah.
That's coming.
I do have one question
Sure.
about cremation. Is there a time limit to bury after
In
cremation?
Judaism? Or,
Well, in Judaism, right? You sit
well,
Shiva.
in Judaism, it's within 2 or 3 days.
Right.
But and that's not just because of Jewish law, but because of practicality. Because if the
Right.
body is not embalmed, and in Judaism we don't embalm the bodies, the body will start decomposing rapidly, especially in the deep south where it's humid and hot. I don't mean to be, but I'm a science teacher, so that, but so that's another reason.
Right. So
Um,
you've got, Judaism, there's Shiva and there's the
Right.
setting of time. But if the body is cremated, should it be buried within 7 days? Or, as my father's still sitting on the dresser and bringing Mom comfort is why
Yeah,
struggle.
I don't think there is
I don't
much ruling on that, because cremation isn't really part of it, so I don't know, but it's a good question.
Yeah, I think if it brings comfort
Yeah,
to your mom,
Yeah,
then
I mean, it's just kind of
it brings
throws
comfort
it all
to
the laws
Anna,
out the window,
and
doesn't it?
this is what's meaningful. There's no right in Reform Judaism for, an individual or for a group to tell someone in situations such as those, what's right and what's wrong. I think, from my perspective, I was just thinking about this morning. I adopt a kind of Rogerian approach. In other words, that what's going to be most meaningful to that person, and how can I bring whatever I know about Judaism as a rabbi to help that person along life's path. And sometimes, I think Glenn, you illustrated it beautifully when you're weighing different commandments. Ultimately, we're looking for, in those situations, we're looking for comfort. That's the whole meaning. That's what's all behind the mourning practices. And like, for example, why 7 days? And there's scripture that says 7 days. But also we have a tendency psychologically to push death aside and not deal with it. Here you're committing 7 days of mourning to help you just adjust to a terrible loss. It's painful. So those 7 days, the halacha is not some kind of arbitrary thing that's imposed, but rather designed to help it. But from my perspective as a Reform rabbi, the question always has to be asked, what's going to be most helpful to that individual along life's path? What's going to bring them comfort when they suffer a terrible loss like that, a beloved? So the focus is on the individual, and the books and all that other learning is designed to help that person, not be in conflict.
And that's one of the beautiful things about Reform Judaism. You know, if I want to lay tefillin, that's fine in Reform Judaism, because I'm going to do it because I think it's meaningful and it means something to me and it's important. If you were to ask an Orthodox Jew, why are you putting on tefillin? I have to. Well, how meaningful? Meaningfulness has nothing to do with it.
Yeah, it's like reading.
I have to do it, and that's what you do. My grandfather, you remember my grandfather, but grandpa, why we do? Because you do it. Yes, sir. And so that's one of the beauties of Reform Judaism. And also, it's weird to me that you know, modern day psychology has caught up with Judaism in the sense of the stages of mourning, because it is a human thing to gradually come down from that mourning. Whereas the first step is where you sit lowly on the floor, that you cover mirrors, that you don't think about vanity, that you're in this shock, and then for 7 days you don't go out and you don't go to parties, and then 30 days there's of that, and then the last stage is for a year, where now you can go to bar mitzvahs or to weddings, but and then the marking, the official end of mourning would be the unveiling of the monument, which personal feeling of that with you. And so that gradual increase of coming back into society and coming back into the community and just having fun and participating in things, that gradual reemergence has been part of Judaism, you know, for longer than there's been the science of psychology. And now psychologists say the same thing about how to grieve.
I would just supplement that again. That's a beautiful overview of the underlying purposes of all these rituals, all these mourning practices. One of the things that as a rabbi, you watch and you know that the recitation of the mourner's Kaddish can be very meaningful, you know. And it's sad for me when I'm presiding over a funeral or going to a shiva, and I completely understand, you know, that it's difficult for people to recite the Kaddish. They don't. It's Aramaic. It's not something they do every day, but yet the recitation of the Kaddish every day as a signal of the mourning can be very comforting once you really master it. You have to master it, and that's not an easy thing to do. It becomes like a mantra.
It's a rhythm. There's a rhythm.
Yeah. And it gently
Right.
brings back, because you're doing it for the soul of someone, right? So your mind kind of goes there, and it goes to other places too, but you don't have to focus on the words so much, but rather you're taking time, like, what was it they said about memory, about the importance of memory, sacred method, that's what it's designed for. Just an interesting piece, you know, you say Kaddish for 11 months, but you don't say it for 12 months. Why? Because you only say it for 12 months for a bad person. But since most people are good people, you know, particularly the person who you're saying Kaddish for, you only go to the 11th month. That's
An interesting thing about
I think it's an interesting psychology. The person is good, you don't have to worry about the person's soul.
And one of the interesting things about the Kaddish is there's no mention of death at all in the Kaddish.
Yeah.
It's a reaffirmation of God, and it's kind of to me, it's a reflection of Judaism's optimistic view of the world and life, and so we recite it regularly for the yard sites and for at funerals, but it's really has nothing to do with death.
To me, death is such a finality, and I would love to think, that I would be reunited with my dad,
Sure.
my mother, my husband. But so I think that would be so wonderful to feel that way. And my feeling about death and grief is that life just sort of grows around the grief.
Right.
You always, you always miss that loved
Sure.
one, but
Sure.
you do move on.
Sure.
And a lot, I think, for your children, and you don't want them to worry about you, and
Right.
so you live.
It's kind of an affirmation to me that people have been doing this same recitation for thousands of years, and we're still here. So even though I'm heartbroken and devastated and all the feelings I feel right now, this minute, I'm going to move past this and become one in the line of people who've done it for thousands of years. And I'll keep going because that's what they did. And I can do that too. It won't be easy, but I can do that. So it's kind of like, it's a binding together and putting things into perspective too. This is the worst thing that could possibly happen to me, but I'm going to keep going because that's what we do.
Yeah.
Your husband's a lucky guy. I don't know who it is.
I tell him many times a day.
You are correct.
Well,
Yes.
I want to talk about the cottage for just a minute.
Sure.
I always have heard, ever since I was young, doesn't mention death and all, that's interesting and all that. But we only do it when it's on the anniversary, when somebody has died, and when it's on the anniversary of death. I don't think about the fact that it doesn't mention
because
death.
it
I mean,
represents-
that's just something I learned a long time ago.
Yeah.
Quite frankly, I could not tell you what those Hebrew words translate to, so that doesn't matter. I mean, it's something to comfort us.
Right.
It's a reminder,
Right.
and in the rhythm of it, which a lot of what we, the davening, the praying, it's the rhythm, it's getting into it. And when I come to, for services and the music and, or the music Shabbat services, it's just what it evokes there. But I don't think about that mentioned death. And the other thing, the fact that, at funerals, I think it's universal. Most funerals and most religions is to comfort the individual, but it's still a terrible tragedy, no matter what, and it's okay for us to experience that as living human beings.
Absolutely.
We don't wish it on anybody, but it's part of a reminder of the mortality of life. And it's a horrible feeling, especially the circumstances of the death and, whether the parent losing a child or it's a terrible tragedy, but we're all collectively trying to comfort the individual. And there's something to be said for that. But it's not just unique to Judaism. We all have our rituals about how we do it, but it's nice as society as a whole, as opposed when you see the horrors and war in Ukraine, when, bodies have been buried and dumped and left on the side of the road. There's something to be said for a civilized society.
Sure.
Did we do that?
That we are come together as humans.
Come in and,
as a community.
And showing that sensitivity.
It's very powerful.
So,
It's very powerful when that happens.
But like you said, psychology, some psychology to help us cope and deal with it. But at the same time, we can experience sorrow and experience the tragedy of it all.
And I think I think traditions are very comforting. You know, I mean,
Absolutely.
think of the Kol Nidre and just, and yard sites, and I mean, everything, I mean, even that doesn't deal with death, it's still, you just know it's going to come every year, the holidays or whatever, and it's comforting.
And we want to be able to connect. We want it, whether it's collectively or even if we're just doing it ourselves, and
Right.
still connecting somehow. And it may be to a higher being, whatever.
Right.
And it can be abstract, it can be very concrete depending on what we believe in. But it is important to us to be able to do that.
I found that Christian funerals seem so much more positive than ours, though. We were just at a funeral yesterday, and it was in the Catholic Church. And first of all, the music, the songs are just so beautiful. And I was thinking yesterday, would any of these fit? Could I use these in
Request that choir.
request them in mine, you know, but it is, I mean, you know, it's like, you know, it's one of the sentences is, you know, I've prepared a place for you, and I don't know, it just seems like it's, maybe it is their view of heaven, or we don't, you know, maybe we don't have no definition of heaven or whatever we believe of that heaven.
But that's
But they-
comforting.
But they seem to be so much more sure of,
Right.
you know,
Good point.
see their loved ones.
Good point.
But
I was
I,
thinking about.
but, and I have been to Christian funerals too, and I went to one recently a few months ago. But I still take comfort in our Jewish funerals. I mean, I like it.
Sure.
You know, just, so it's, you know, different ways of doing that. I mean, think about, you know, other religions or even Native Americans, Indians.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, it brings that kind of comfort to people, so.
You were gonna say?
I was thinking about what you said about how psychology is catching up with the Jewish prescription for mourning. And I'm trying to rattle through in my head the stages of grief. I might get them wrong, but I think they are denial and bargaining, and anger, depression, and acceptance. And the fourth one, depression, is the sticky one. It's the one where the greatest risk exists for getting stuck on it.
Right.
But if there's a prescription,
And they're not in particular order.
if you
They're-
deliberately go
exactly.
through,
They
yeah,
can,
right.
it jumps back, jumps around.
It's not it's all individual, and not
Sure.
everybody follows.
Of course, but if there's a prescription for
Well,
going
that would
through
be
the
nice.
process,
It's just
and
like
you do
raising
it
children.
with the help of your loved ones that are with you still,
Right.
Well, and
then
it's
you're more
permission.
likely to keep the momentum and get to
Yeah.
the final step, because the last step is the most important. You know,
Right.
Acceptance is where we need to wind up with it.
Yeah,
And that's where the grace is, and that's where you're giving confidence to your children and others, yeah.
Very good.
It's neat.
oh, just that it's permission to move on.
Yeah.
You know, it's easy to get stuck sometimes. And when you have a prescription, as you called it, it's a matter of timing, you know, okay, you've done this and felt this for so long. You're allowed to do it that way, and then let's take another step and move on and keep going and get things a little bit back to normal, and where you can kind of see your life changing a bit. So it's.
You know, I've
That's
been
comforting.
to a number of Jewish funerals or memorial services. And I think they are as uplifting as Christian services, primarily in the way you remember the individual. To me, that's what the service is all about.
Sure,
Mhm.
The
yeah.
celebration of the life of the individual. And y'all do a wonderful job of that.
There you
And,
go.
some Christians don't do such a good job of that.
See, grass and
Well,
greener.
the focus is still different.
Yeah.
You know, we're focused on doing what we need to do to honor this person and move them along to
Right.
whatever it may be.
Right,
And Christians more celebrate what's going to be,
yeah.
and they're saying goodbye.
Right.
So it's apples and
But they're
oranges,
both good,
but that's good,
you know.
yeah.
They're all focused
Everybody
on
needs comfort somehow.
individual.
I think the difference between the beautiful service, the woods of, say, Catholicism or other Christian denominations with organ and beautiful music and a majestic setting, a church setting, as opposed to Judaism. We're seeing more and more funerals at graveside and not maybe 15, 20 years ago, they would be in this temple, and then from the temple, there'd be a procession. That is not as popular as it used to be. We're seeing more, at least from my, maybe I'm wrong here.
Well, COVID probably helped. that
Maybe,
along.
yeah, very, very possible. I think it underlies a sort of difference. Not saying one is right or one is better than the other. I think Judaism takes in, when it comes to the funeral, a more here and now kind of perspective about where we are in life in relation to death. The people who come and pay tribute and pay honor also at some level recognize that, their own finitude, their own, that life has a beginning and life has an end. And in some respects, the end is a mystery. That's why, we say God giveth and God taketh away. And for us, there really is no real explanation that can account for the loss of someone who we deeply, deeply love. And so I think the Jewish funeral, it always focuses on the life of the person. You never hear words of, the soul's going to go to heaven, and there's going to be this wonderful thing. And I think the music, for example, the Amal Rachamim, reflects that.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, I think the recitation of the Kaddish in a very mournful manner, very sad. I think that allows for, to me, speaking as someone who's interested in mental health and interested in the grieving process, gives some permission for people to experience and release some of that grief and not move so quickly away from them. I'm just speaking from a psychological perspective. Not to say that a person of the Roman Catholic tradition doesn't experience grief and all of that, but from a ritual standpoint, I think the Jewish funeral focuses on the here and the now and the burial, and not so much about what's going to happen afterwards to the soul of the person. And I think there's a sort of, at some level, a choice that's made in Judaism that we're going to let people mourn and grieve and not move them away from that experience as you're listening to the life of the individual described in the Hesped, the eulogy. I mean, another thing that's become more popular, it wasn't as popular when I first began being a rabbi, and at least where I was practicing, was the throwing of the dirt onto the coffin.
You say it is more or
It's
less?
more popular.
Yeah.
I'm seeing it more and more. I'm in reform. I'm not
Yes,
just,
no, we've
not just,
always done that.
you've always done that? Has that always been a
I think so.
tradition here?
Yes, that I know of.
Okay, so, but.
And with an inverted shovel.
Yeah, you hear, in other places, it's becoming more and more.
I think it's powerful.
Oh, when you think of the psychology.
Oh
of
my
that,
gosh,
the
and when you
person
hear the
who's
dirt
lost
hit
their
The
loved one.
sound.
the sound is what gets to me every single time. That sound.
Yeah. And, again, you see a more, when we were talking about the music, when I think of that, I think of Brahms' Requiem, if you think of the sixth one. It's just
Those
this,
are beautiful.
yeah, and by the way, most of the verses are not from the.
Masterpieces, yeah.
Yeah, well, all masterpieces, right, but they're I don't think Christ is only mentioned a few times in the whole hour, very, very, very downplayed. But, the very end of that is just so majestic, I think he wrote it for his mother, if I'm not mistaken.
But it's beautiful.
Yeah, it's beautiful. But at the end, I mean, it's just soars up to heaven. I mean, the notes are so majestic. I mean, it's like the Hallelujah chorus almost.
Well,
Has that sound to it almost.
a good friend, African-American friend of mine passed away a few years ago, and I was the only white person at the funeral. And I thought to myself the whole time, if there's a God watching over a funeral, it's this one now. And if there's, that choir, that chorus, I was ready to convert. It was just so powerful at this very traditional African-American funeral, that just, in the chorus and the choir,
Yeah, just beautiful.
I had an experience just like that too.
unbelievable.
It's not to say one is superior, it's just a cultural difference, a religious difference that grew out of various traditions.
And in the African American state, everybody comes.
Yes.
It's like, I went for one of my students, she was black, and we were only 2 white person teachers. And it was full, people were outside.
The community comes
The
together.
whole community comes. And they're singing,
beautiful.
and they're getting up, and the woman's dressed in white.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Giving
Yeah.
you, it's really, everybody comes.
It's very powerful.
What got me at what I attended was when the minister got up on the altar.
Oh,
That
wow.
was,
Wow.
It's something.
it is something.
It's talking about Southern traditions, boy, that you can't get more Southern than that. Well, we have 10 minutes left, believe it or not. And we knew we were not gonna cover the list, but that was okay, we decided, and we did cover probably 2/3 of the things, but we liked it being driven by you more than us to kind of see what path we took. So with 10 minutes left, Rabbi, anything you would like to bring up, or if any of you would like to ask or bring up anything in these last few minutes?
Well, I would wish that we would continue, and maybe if you want more people, then do some kind of, because I think it used to be in the news when.
Right,
Concept
we
it was in
did.
the
See, that's the way I
newspaper.
wanted it, yeah,
And,
yes.
Do you read the newspaper?
no,
See, that's our problem. Glenn and I talked about it. There is no paper.
We
you got
had a daily
now.com could
paper,
do
and
it.
I would read it from beginning to end, and like a lot of people, but we don't have that anymore. That's when we
We've done the lanyard.
used to.
Yeah, the
And
lanyard
maybe
would
that's
work,
what we could
and
do.
there's still in social media, the lanyard's very popular, and we can do that.
Yeah.
But anyway, yes.
But you know what, I think the beauty of this small group was that it was a small group.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
And I
that
might-
was my hesitation
Yeah,
of
sure.
telling my friends.
There were
because-
pros and cons, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Well, I think you could limit it. I mean, you could do a large session, it wouldn't be as intimate, it would be more instructional.
Right,
But I think we ought to open up Zoom a little bit more next
that's a
time,
good point.
so that they can ask questions without having to text a sister.
Is Robin,
She's done it for 3 weeks in a row.
is
Yes.
Robin on there now?
She was supposed, I don't know, but she
Hey,
was
Robin.
for me.
If she have a question,
Let's see
she
if I
can
can
text
unmute
us.
her. I may can unmute her. Hang on.
So one of the things about Christian
Oh, yeah, what's on
dialogue,
here?
that at the beginning,
Yeah, she is
it
on
was shown to everybody to come. And we had problems because people wanted to convert you at the beginning.
Right.
So you had to.
You had
back
to
up a little
establish
bit.
the purpose.
What was
And
this?
also on the trialogue, people will come, it was advertised and people come, and became kind of a fight because I wanted to convert you into me, and so.
There's
they
gotta be
started-
boundaries, yeah.
They had to lower it and just, people know, so if you have a friend who likes to do this, you can invite them, come, and not advertising too much, because then people might come just to
Yeah,
fight against what you have.
it's a tough call.
It's
You're right.
Well, how do y'all feel about?
I think Robin may be unmuted. Robin, can you hear us?
I can.
I asked if she had it. She said, thank you for answering my question. I'm not sure I understood the answer,
Oh,
but something to think about.
tell she can call me.
She was
or
on the
write
kind
it.
of thing, it's called one.
Or in the
called
rabbi.
The
one.
most,
Just
most of
write
the
it.
answers in Judaism are kind of, sort of,
I know,
so
I'll tell her.
it's hard.
You know, I had a very good friend of mine who was a priest from Spain,
Oh, shoot.
a wonderful priest. He used to come for our all celebrations. And he would always say, we would talk, and he would talk about no cremation, you know, because they believe in cremation, Catholics do not believe in cremation.
Yeah,
So we talked about it, and I kept trying to tell him, I want to be cremated. And we talked and talked. Then about time goes by, and one of the priests, a younger priest, passed away from Spain. So the family came to pick up the body to take it back. Well, they wouldn't allow it. They had to cremate the priest and to be able to take
Wow.
it back. So he called me a week later and he said, I need to
Wow.
talk to you seriously. I need you to make sure that they will cremate me. So I
Wow.
want to go back to my family in Spain.
Interesting. Yeah, it's a matter of priorities.
Yeah, and he was cremated.
Right.
And I went there and but it was, I mean, we fought so much. We talked about it.
No, you're right.
And then boom, something.
I don't know how to
changes.
That's-
I don't know how to unmute the computer. The
Gil,
computer
you were gonna
speaker
say
is
something?
No,
Tell her
I
I'm
was gonna
sorry.
say, when the Taste of Judaism, you know, to wrap this, came out of the membership committee.
Right, yeah, because I was. on the
Yeah,
membership
so
committee.
it was hopefully to try to
That was the
attract
point.
not just people who want to convert, but also unaffiliated Jews. But now it's morphed into something different, and I think about all the intermarried in our congregation, and it, you know, it'd be nice, it'd be a great way, because we want to reach out to the non-Jewish spouse.
Well,
We
that-
recognize the importance of elevating that and get that person involved, and I don't know how we could reach out to the intermarried couples, but we have a lot of
We
them.
should, it's
To
very important.
maybe it'd be something that would be of interest if we could.
Well, it's the largest demographic now, in the United States, as far as Jews go.
Here.
And,
Yeah, so-
that, yeah, a year or so ago, when I was on the membership committee, that's where, the reason it came up was a tool to get people involved and to welcome them and to help with membership and all that kind of thing too. But yeah, that was the original.
Well, I
We
mean,
can,
the whole thing about with membership is not for it to be passive.
right,
It's for it to be active,
Thank you.
trying to figure out
exactly.
in this aging congregation, which is half the size it was 30 years ago, 25, 30 years ago. And how do we reach people? What are their interests in wanting to be connected to this
I agree.
to this particular community? For some people, services is very important, tour study is important. Others, it may be programming, it may be social action, it may be just wanting to congregate or socialize with
I
other
agree.
people of similar religion. But it's our obligation to try to reach out, and you know that.
I couldn't agree more. And maybe I'm being too idealistic, but yes, our membership has dwindled, and we may not be as many out there, but I still say there's a lot of potential members, of potential active members, who are unaffiliated or were affiliated a long time ago, and then one, you know, and a lot of interfaith marriages that we could, that it would provide a great pool to
Well,
bring
and
it
I
back.
agree with
And
you. I mean,
that's,
you know, that was one of the reasons I took over
Yeah,
the department.
yeah.
I felt like, you know, I had chaired a long-range planning committee, and it was a wonderful
Right.
experience for me, and I think it was for those on the committee.
right,
Enjoyed that. And I said, well, you know, it's a chance, an opportunity to take that paper off the proverbial dusty shelf and try to put it into practice. And you know, I still think we
Absolutely.
have a vital community.
I do too.
I still think we do a lot of good. We can, but we are at a crossroads. I mean, we have to think about, plan ahead, Are we doing everything we can to take care of the existing members? Are we doing what we should be doing to attract people to want to join this
I agree.
wonderful place? So,
I agree 100%.
Maybe we need a little more, something a little more continuous, maybe once a month, and you can, like we knew today, we were coming in and talking about heaven. And if you had it topic driven and had a particular, I mean, I look at Fairhope has First Friday Art Walk, they do it in Mobile. I think if you have
A
something
regular thing,
constant,
yeah.
regular, and then you have a reason to keep promoting it.
well, and that's why programming is so
Right.
important. And this is really all part of programming. And in a way, this adult ed, whatever you want to call it, I think it's still worth doing. And like you said, I think that's a great suggestion. Is to think
And
about
maybe, and if we
not
can't,
do it every
not
Sunday
depend on
afternoon.
you guys every time you pull, we've got
Sure.
other educators that we could,
Sure,
I mean, maybe we could get Sam to do it
Sure,
a month. You know, if we
sure.
could have different people doing it once a
absolutely.
month.
And that in
having
itself
the content.
involves congregants, gets them
Right.
involved,
Mhm.
right,
Absolutely. So I know we've got so many well-educated
sure.
people that, not to, I think y'all have done a fabulous
No,
job. I
to
just don't think
share-
we could commit to
no.
you every
No,
month.
there's a
And
lot out
poor
there to
Rabbi.
share.
Yeah.
Any other comments? We really appreciate you being here. And, anything you'd like to say or ask or anything? Because you've been so great and nice to be here with us.
The majority part of today.
No, you've been great. You've been great. And we really appreciate it. And your reasoning for being here is such a tribute. And that in itself is a mitzvah. So you're performing a mitzvah right there. Rabbi, any
I just
words of
wanna say
wisdom to
one-
pass on to finish us up?
Well, I wish I did, but I will say that I think it's wonderful that you all came, three sessions.
Yeah,
and,
That's dedication.
participated, and I hope and pray that this was enriching in some way. And, we're always available. I mean, rabbi means teacher, but also listening and being able to interact and talk about the profound ideas that we encountered over the course of 3 sessions. I would be more than happy to continue in some form that we can talk about. And I know Glenn is available, and I'm always available. That's what I do here. So never hesitate to call. And also, there are classes. I know that, for example, Torah studies at 5:30. If you really want to understand the foundations of Judaism, Torah study is definitely the way to go. If sometimes Friday night services, of course, and other adult ed programming that you'd like to see, particularly in the course of the week, for those people who are retired and would like, on like a noontime kind of study session. I think these are things that we can implement. But most gratifying is all of your participation here this afternoon, and hopefully we've enriched. I know it's been wonderful working with Glenn. I think
Same here.
so much from him, and I think we've all just benefited so much from your wisdom and from your knowledge.
I
Thank you.
appreciate it. And I was going to say the same from you. And I think one of the most fun things about being a teacher is most teachers I find love to learn. I mean, that's the whole point of it. And I've learned much more from you than I think you have from me, and I really appreciate it this week. I've enjoyed it, and I've learned from the rabbi. You're very wise, and your in-depth knowledge of Torah and Talmud are amazing. And all of you, it's been great. And you're right, as much as I wanted a big crowd, the intimacy of it, there's a lot to be said for that too. We got to know each other on different
We
levels.
appreciate what y'all done, because I know you put a lot of time and
Yes.
effort
Well,
into it, and I think
labor of
it's
love.
just really been,
Thank
it's
you.
just a worthwhile way to spend a Sunday.
Well, thank you.
afternoon.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Thank you
it.
so much.
for sticking with us.
Yeah, thank you.
And I
My
like
sister said, I
having
enjoyed the sessions and I appreciate being able to serve.
Oh,
We'll make it participate.
yes.
And from my perspective, it was very helpful to hear the presentations and the discussions And the reason I came was to have a better understanding of Judaism, so thank you.
Well, and your input was invaluable
And for us to
because
better understand.
it gave us a different perspective, which we needed. So that was good. Very good.
And I appreciate that you were so open with your
Yes,
perspective.
yeah,
That was
we
just great, I
appreciate
love
that.
that.
Agreed.
You've
For
done
what
good.
two of
I think we should continue personally.
We'll talk about it. We will.
We
Talk some more.
definitely can as a group, that would be wonderful.
So thank you. And thanks to Carol for organizing it and getting us together, and I've enjoyed it. Thanks for coming to the truth. Anyway, I guess,
Thank you.
yes, thank you very much.